when this case was heard and the judgment pronounced, there were 10 bills that were pending with the governor. And I think this is not a Tamil Nadu only problem, right? We cannot lose sight that Telangana has gone to court. Kerala faced similar issues with its governor. So wherever there are opposition ruled states, many of them have already gone to court.
Specifically referred to the finding or the reiteration, of course, in that in a parliamentary form of democracy, it is the elected cabinet and the elected government which holds the power and not the governor, and they have the right and the governor cannot withhold it.
I feel the conversation now really has to move towards, do we need the post of governor? Should it be abolished?
And welcome to another episode of Table Talk. I am Jyotsna. In a landmark judgment, the Supreme Court has held that the action of Tamil Nadu Governor Ravi to reserve 10 bills for the President was illegal and erroneous, and the Supreme Court has set aside all actions taken by the Governor in relation to these 10 bills. The Supreme Court has ruled that governors cannot delay or withhold assent to bill indefinitely once they have been passed or repassed by the State Assembly. It is unconstitutional, says the Supreme Court. Some bills that the governor had withheld assent to dated back to as far as 2020. Governor Ravi is not new to controversies. He once sacked a minister without recommendation or consultation of the chief minister. Barely hours later, the dismissal was put in abeyance, reportedly on orders of the Home Ministry to avoid a constitutional standoff. Ravi has also walked out of the assembly in the past without delivering his customary address. But there will be relief in non-BJP ruled states. They will be watching closely. In Kerala, there has also been an instance where the governor, Arif Muhammad Khan, had in the past written to the chief minister that the state finance minister had ceased to enjoy the pleasure of the governor's office. Unlike Ravi, he recommended the dismissal, which was rejected. Amicable relations between Raj Bhavan and an opposition-ruled government in a state are as much a given as India winning gold medals at the Olympics. A search for anything but acrimony, latent or overt, will need a deep dive into political archives. India follows a parliamentary system and not a presidential one. In other words, as per the Constitution, a governor, appointee of the centre, shall take the chief minister's advice in appointments and dismissals. His primary role is to be consulted. He should be above politics, an interpretation that is almost laughable today. Most governors behave as party members. As per the words of B.R. Ambedkar, the centre should always consult the chief minister in appointment of a governor. But we know the reality. So have relations between a governor and an elected government always been this bad? Raj Bhavan can sack a state government that has lost majority but is unwilling to resign. But this is the only instance where the action is unquestionable. Even this power was misused by former Maharashtra Governor Bhagat Singh Koshyari, who was called out by the Supreme Court for his role in a political tussle that saw the removal of the Uddhav Thackeray government. The Supreme Court says that the governor is the titular head of the state government and a constitutional functionary who derives his authority from the Constitution. In a first of its kind, in Aap-ruled Punjab, Governor Bhanwari Lal Purohit refused to convene the budget session, forcing the Maan government to move the Supreme Court. In April 2021, the government of the National Capital Territory of Delhi Amendment Act was implemented, making the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi the dominant governing body despite an elected government. Since then, there was a face-off almost every other month between the governor and the government. Things have rapidly quietened now that the BJP is in power in Delhi. India has a new parliament, the Majestic Rajpath has been renamed, textbooks are being sanitized, all moves ostensibly to come out of our colonial hangover. Why then does the post of the governor a dubious legacy of the British era still flourish.
Kicking off this conversation with Dhanya Rajendran, the editor-in-chief of News Minute, and Avi Singh, who's a senior advocate and a political economist. So, Avi, I'd really like you to give us a sense of what you make of it and, where it stands today.
Essentially, the division bench of Justice Padiwala and Justice Mahadevan pronounced that the Tamil Nadu governors, Sri R.N. Ravi's delay in granting assent, as well as after the bills had been returned, there were, I think, 10 bills largely related to the appointment of VCs and chancellors of Tamil Nadu state universities, had been illegal and was void ab initio. So these 10 bills, including the ones that were referred to the president, have been deemed to have become law. In addition, there was pronouncements with regard to the actual discretion that the governor had, which, in my opinion at least, has been severely limited by the Honorable Supreme Court. So they've given a 30-day period in which they have to return it, if they are going to return it, the governors. They've given a 90-day period for assent. Presumably, after that period is over, these bills would be deemed to have become law. So that does limit the discretion. They've also gone ahead and defined what is discretion as something which is judicially reviewable, which is a very important. So it's not an absolute discretion. But of course, these are the sort of the final pages which were read out.
Dhanya, some of these bills have been lying in abeyance, so to speak, since 2020, isn't it?
Yeah, I think in total there were more than 20 bills at one point of time. I remember making a listicle then of the 21 bills that were pending with the Tamil Nadu governor. But under pressure, he did give sanction to a few. I think a few were sent to the president. But eventually, when this case was heard and the judgment pronounced, there were 10 bills that were pending with the governor. And I think this is not a Tamil Nadu only problem, right? We cannot lose sight that Telangana has gone to court. Kerala faced similar issues with its governor. So wherever there are opposition ruled states, many of them have already gone to court saying that the governor simply does not give assent to bills, or despite an elected assembly passing the bill and sending it back to the governor twice, the governor just then sends it to the president and does not move on the bill. So I feel the conversation now really has to move towards, do we need the post of governor? Should it be abolished?
Are we going to get you onto that?
I mean, definitely it's not a Tamil Nadu only problem, because in fact, one of the cases referred to in this judgment is the state of Punjab case, which is a 2023 case in which the governor had refused to call a session of the legislature. And the court specifically referred to the finding, or the reiteration, of course, in that in a parliamentary form of democracy, it is the elected cabinet and the elected government which holds the power and not the governor. And they have the right, and the governor cannot withhold it. So it is a pronouncement, but it is also reiteration. And this reiteration has been done many times before. It's unfortunate that the courts are having to wade in to solve conflicts between governors and the state governments. But in fact, it was the governor's job, and I think it was mentioned in the oral pronouncement, to sort of calm waters and be a constitutional head rather than a political. And I think the word political was used by the bench while pronouncing the order. So it'll find that wording will be there, that the governors can't be used or should not be indulging in political acts.
Dhanya, these political acts, what kind of political acts have we been seeing in the last few years? Those have gone above and beyond even what we now expect a governor to be.
So I think the problem here is that though it's a constitutional post, the governor is supposed to be the constitutional head of the state. Both the Congress, all governments, all union governments, whether it's been the Congress in power or the BJP, they have made this post sort of exclusive for either their retired politicians or for retired bureaucrats. In fact, there was a research by a professor, Ashok Pankaj, which said that around 50 or I think 55% of governors were politicians and around 30% were bureaucrats. So when they take charge as governors, the politicians, especially in R.N. Ravi's case, he's a bureaucrat who's behaving more like a politician now, the Tamil Nadu governor that is, they cannot keep their politics aside, which we have seen happening through all regimes. And I think it's become more acute a problem after the BJP came in, because this government by design uh, is more vested in putting all the powers in the center, right? So that's how the governor also behaves. Because you asked how have governors behaved, constitutionally, of course, they have done all that they can, at least across the southern states, to delay bills, to not give assent to bills. But other than that, the governors have been very politically active. We have seen the Kerala governor almost on a daily basis, and I'm not exaggerating, on a daily basis, he used to give interviews to the Malayalam media on everything that is happening in the state, whether it's a student's murder, to a political case of corruption, everything the governor had a comment. And there used to be daily riffraffs between the governor and the chief minister of the state. In Tamil Nadu, you have a governor who goes on stage and makes extremely loaded political comments that there is nothing like a Dravidian movement. It's a Sanatana Dharma which has to be there across the country. So governors have clearly forgotten that they are just a constitutional position. That, and which is why I go back to the question as to what will we lose if there is no post of governor? What will happen if that post is abolished? Like Anna once said, the goat does not need a beard, the same way the state does not need a governor.
Very well said, Dhanya.
I'll have to disagree there, because we do need a governor in a parliamentary form of democracy, because obviously prime ministers can't assent to their own acts, because there has to be a constitutional head of state. And in a parliamentary form, like we have the president on the federal level, we can't really do without the post of governor. Now, the question is, the ceremonial post obviously isn't working. So should that post then become an overtly political one? Should it be elected? Or something has to change, because the sort of constitutional guardrails haven't worked. Do these judgments change that? Do governors suddenly start acting constitutionally, restraining themselves from, well, one is public commentary, but also interfering with the state government, which has been actually elected? Well, then they should themselves get elected. So I'm not sure whether things change. And of course, we all want and expect constitutional functionaries to behave with something what we call constitutional morality, which has been again repeated. And courts are having to step in when that constitutional morality isn't followed. The problem is that courts can sort of deal with small variances, but if the variance is too large, courts really struggle, because they can't be, in the end, politicians and constitutional functionaries have to function within a certain set of parameters, which courts can correct, but courts can't be something which is actually setting the field. They can't deal with huge variance between the constitution and acts.
Avi, as Dhanya mentioned, these cases and how we're looking at the governors, it's changed a lot in the last 10 years or so since the BJP came to power. Now, you mentioned Punjab, that's a non-BJP state. Delhi has had so many issues. The moment the BJP governments come, all is kosher and all is clean. Where then do you, in a sense, firstly, let me ask you, do you agree with Dhanya that, these cases have just exploded? These instances have exploded in the last 10 years.
I think that Dhanya also mentioned that perhaps this wasn't the case in the noughts, 2000 onwards, but certainly in the 70s, 80s, 90s, the post of governor was misused equally. So both Congress and BJP have been equal opportunity violators in this respect. And we all remember in Punjab and Bihar and other states, including in the South, in Andhra, in fact, with the TDP government, the role of, or the misuse of governors. And the courts had corrected some of that misuse by making those acts judicially reviewable, including whether, state governments could be sacked. So there has been sort of abuse in the past. We are seeing another attack on federalism, or have seen sort of a move towards centralization in recent times. And we're going to have to see how this pans out, whether these judgments do something to rein it in. And of course, this is coming in the context, very politically charged, but also constitutionally charged context of the upcoming delimitation, which is, of course, an issue in many southern states, but also in Punjab. So how that pans out, what is the role of governors there? It's a very tricky time for federalism. And federalism is, in my opinion at least, quite essential for peaceful functioning of the constitution.
Dhanya, how would you see it? Would you, like Avi says, federalism is a big issue, and I was going to come to that as well. Would you look at this judgment then as something that kind of gives it a fillip?
I don't know how much I am optimistic about the court intervening, because from the SR Bommai case, which we only have read about, we have seen the courts intervening and sort of defining what a governor's role should be. In fact, in 2023, I think it was Chief Justice Chandrachud was hearing the Maharashtra case, where the Maharashtra governor at that time had played his cards to make sure that the government falls, the government of that time. So I think time and again, the court has tried to set boundaries. Of course, this time it's a bit more pronounced, where the court is saying that Article 200 has to have certain time limit. The governor has to have a time limit to bills. But my optimism does not allow me to believe that these kind of interventions are actually helping much. Because if the governors were acting according to what the court is saying, then we will not see a recurrence of this problem, right? Now, I do agree that, okay, constitutionally, we need a post. For federalism also, we need the post of the governor. But if that post has become obsolete over the years and become a problem over the years, then why do we hang on to it? Why are we not thinking of how to change it at least? There is absolutely no change being brought. Or in fact, I was reading this article, I think written a few years ago by Mukul Keshavan, where he said that this is a post which is designed to be unaccountable to the people. Therein lies the problem, right? So how do you make governors accountable? Is it merely to the courts then? So I think we have to really rethink the role that governors play. If we're not going to abolish the role, at least rethink and also fix more responsibilities, time periods, accountability, etc.
Taking two things from what Dhanya said. Firstly, you're on the other side of the divide, Avi. We are on the other side as common people here, looking at the judges who, half the time we think that the courts are dipping in and dipping out. Sometimes it's 2 steps ahead, 1 step back. How optimistic should we be about this judgment?
I guess glass quarter full, 3/4 empty. I mean, optimism is hard to find in the world nowadays, but we've got to sort of carry on, I guess. But just to answer something Dhanya said, they're definitely not meant to be accountable to the people. They're meant to be accountable to the Constitution, because the framers envisaged a conflict between the will of the people and the Constitution. And that is exactly why they were there. So this is, in fact, the real irony of it is that they are not following constitutional morality when they're supposed to be upholding it. And in the end, if constitutional functionaries, and this is not just true in India, we're talking about in the US, if constitutional functionaries don't perform their roles, and that includes judges, then, there won't be much left to be optimistic about.
Dhanya, I want you to take it from where Avi said, not much, to be optimistic about, but what do you look at as an alternative? I mean, we've looked at so many we keep speaking about the colonial era, getting rid of the colonial hangover. We've got a new parliament in place. We've changed names of Rajpath, and yet this one stays, right? Just as, we've got a new version of the sedition law, but it kind of stays.
No, this one stays because it's convenient for everyone, right? Convenient for all the governments which are in power at the union to have a governor who plays your game in the state. And I'm not of any impression that the moment the Congress comes back to power, they're going to change the way a governor operates. They're going to use it the same way, because everybody just learns from the same textbook, just that the BJP knows how to implement it better than the others. Recently we had done a story about Orwell. Orwell is a spiritual community which is in Pondicherry and Villupuram of Tamil Nadu. Now, when we're looking at the story, the Orwell has a governing board, which basically has an IAS officer and other government appointed people who take decisions as to how Orwell should behave. Guess who's the governing board member of Orwell? It is a Tamil Nadu governor. And now the Supreme Court has given a verdict saying that the governing board can decide how Orwell functions, that the residents of that place have no say. Then it made me wonder, like, what all do governors do other than just being governors of the state? They're also part of governing, they're part of universities. For example,
I was going to say education.
One big fight which is happening across states is that, in fact, MK Stalin has moved a bill that the governor should no longer be the chancellor of universities, right? Because that is one place where where the governors have been trying to influence. So there are so many. It's not just about the governor's constitutional duty, or looking at bills or interacting with the assembly. We're also seeing the governors play a role in the functioning of universities, in the functioning of even a spiritual community like Oroville. I don't know what else. So I'm saying there needs to be a hard relook at what has been happening, and if courts are the way to go for it, then that's what has to be done.
Avi, how can these boundaries be set, especially with governors who are in states that are run by the central government?
Again, courts can set the guardrails, but it's very hard for them to police them on a constant basis. You can't have every conflict between a state government and it's the governor of the state end up in the Supreme Court. You just can't function like that because it takes years. As Daniel said, these are 2020 bills. We're in 2025. So can you imagine that's the life of a legislature? So at some level, to have an effective governance, we're going to have to resolve these politically. We're going to have to resolve this with an idea of what is most efficient. But of course, if it is only politics, then that takes a back seat. So again, I think if you're looking for the Supreme Court and the law as written to solve these conflicts, and if constitutional functionaries are not acting within their bounds, then it's going to be sort of more chaos and more conflict, and eventually we'll get some decisions. Courts are good at sorting out what has happened. They're very hard for them to police what's going to happen in the future.
Is there, in your mind, an alternative? I know you said, governors need to stay for...
I have the same question. I have the same question. And who do we look at the parliament to intervene?
I'm hoping there's a I mean, not to say there should be constitutional amendments. I know that's a dangerous thing to say nowadays, but an appointment of governors which is in consonance with the state government would be a good step. We've seen these where opposition and the government appoints things like the Central Vigilance Commission, etc. Even if there is a role there, a sort of combined choice, I think, would help in reducing the political role of governors. And then sort of defining these protocols and what they can come in and ensuring that the democratic voice is something which trumps. Of course, even democratic voices can violate the Constitution, but within the Constitution. But who is going to be the governor? We've had retired bureaucrats. Dania mentioned those are problematic sometimes. We've had retired or sort of made to retire politician. That can be problematic. So where are we going to find these women and men who are going to behave constitutionally?
And I think we've come really far from, where I think B.R. Ambedkar kind of emphasized that it would be all these luminaries who had nothing to do, and wouldn't act as another extra member of the party, isn't it, Dhanya?
No, and I was actually thinking when he said that there should be consensus between the state and the union government. Of course, that's been a huge problem, right? There is no state say is not there when a governor is appointed. But then I was thinking, if by whatever chance the state also has a say and the state opts for someone who's perhaps a milder politician. We've had many examples in the recent past where mild politicians became governors and they just transformed in their personalities. For example, is a Telangana governor, Tamilisai Soundarajan, someone who's believed to be moderate within the BJP. But the second she became the governor, she started behaving like all the other governors. So I was thinking, what would be a state's option to then say no politicians, whether mild, moderate, or extreme, that no retired or semi-retired politicians can become governors?
So is this the reality then, are we going forward that, states like Punjab will have to just keep going to the court and, asking for something which is, it's a no-brainer, right? Calling the assembly, having a budget session, and yet you have to go to the court.
Well, it's the reality today. We always wish that things can only get better, but experience shows us that things can get worse.
Very, very not optimistic, but Dhanya, I'm going to end this with you quickly because you're there, and we're going back to the Tamil Nadu governor before. This is not his first tryst, so to speak, with the controversy. He's walked out without the national anthem. He's kind of tried to dismiss a minister on his own. Is he going to take this lying down?
I'm only wondering, is he going to resign? Once a judgment comes, and if it's quite severe in words, as what we saw transpiring in court, if the judgment is equally severe, would the governor think of stepping down? That's the question. But I don't think that's going to happen. That's just a rhetorical question. I think he is going to double down on Tamil Nadu government. And remember, there is an election coming, 2026. So as of now, it does not look like the governor may have to play a big role if the DMK walks away with the majority. But if by any chance it doesn't, the governor's role does assume more importance in the state. Therefore, I think the BJP would want to retain R.N. Ravi, and by no chance would they want him to step down.
No one resigns anymore, do they? I mean, you have train accidents and the minister will keep going. You have such a severe indictment. It's going to keep going, isn't it, Ravi?
Well, there's no legal requirement for them to resign, but morality is a different thing. Yeah.
All right, Dhanya and Avi, I'm going to leave you guys with this. It was a very engaging conversation, and we're going to wait to see what the governor's next steps are. As Dhanya says, he's going to double down. So I think there's more to come there. But I think the other states are going to be watching this very, very closely, especially states that are not ruled by the BJP. So for now, I think this question continues. Should the governor's post stay, or is it time to abolish it? But for now, thank you both.